One of our MPs is supporting a plan to make Norwich a clean air zone. But should those who pollute the most pay to drive into our city? Charges for the most polluting vehicles should be introduced in Norwich, according to Clive. The government's already planning clean air zones in cities like Birmingham, Leeds and Southampton. But what could it mean for Norwich? Christina Brinkley's been finding out.
Outdoor air pollution contributes to 40,000 early deaths a year in the UK, according to the Royal College of Physicians. One of the main pollutants, nitrogen dioxide, is produced mainly by diesel vehicles. Last year, there were 12 illegal levels recorded in Norfolk, one of those on Castle Meadow. If Norwich does become a clean air zone, the owners of the most polluting buses, taxis, coaches and lorries will be charged to enter the area. But private cars are not included in the plans. Norwich City Council bosses are backing the idea, but say they're already taking steps to improve air quality. So what could it mean for businesses? Well, some are sceptical, and although support cleaner air, say the proposals could end up costing more for customers. And the new standards for less polluting diesel vans only came in last September, meaning relatively new vehicles would still have to pay. But the power doesn't lie here, though. Central government will have to make the decision about whether to give places like Norwich the power to enact clean air zones.
So, should the most polluting vehicles be charged for coming into Norwich city centre? Here to talk about this is Bert Bremner, who's the Cabinet Member for Environment and Sustainable Development on Norwich City Council. Also with us, Helena Wright, the Transport Manager from haulage company W's, and Andrew Boswell, who represents the Green Party on the County Council. So very briefly, if you would, first of all, good idea or bad idea and why?
Good idea, it's quite simply why, because we do need to make sure that we have clean air in Norwich and in Norfolk. I mean, as he's explained, there was so many all over Norfolk. It's a great idea, but we've got to have the powers. And so it's fine for talk, we've got to have the powers to be able to do it.
Helena Wright, what do you make of the idea?
I think it's a good idea, but I think it needs to go into more detail of exactly, is there going to be a limitation on how far these charges are going to go? Because obviously, as it rightly said, charges are going to affect the consumer at the end of the day from a business point of view.
Andrew Boswell, Green Party, I guess you're supporting it.
Yeah, I think this is a really good idea, and I'm glad that Clive has raised this. It's a pity that him and other MPs and government people didn't actually start talking about this years ago, because the court case has actually been running for 5 or 6 years now.
Which court case is this?
This is the Client Earth case, which has led to all of this effectively. And now the government are at serious risk of being fined by the EU and all sorts of things. Now they're finally thinking about it. But in terms of our city, yes, we need to do it, and but we can't just penalise people. We need to actually get a scrappage system in for all sorts of vehicles, I think, and we need to talk about that as the programme goes on.
And we'll talk about all of those issues. And as you mentioned, the issue of clean air in the city has been a concern for some time, but now the Norwich South MP, Clive Lewis, has decided it's time to get behind the idea of a charging zone.
If you have a vehicle, you enjoy the benefits of being able to move around, but there is a cost, a social cost, which is the pollution that comes out of the car. So you get to go from A to B conveniently as you want, but you also potentially, if your engine isn't up to a certain specification, will be choking the people. What they're saying is, if you want to make air cleaner, you want to make air safer, then that means that you have to give people an incentive to make their engines either cleaner or not use their car and use public transport or walk or cycle to come into the city. Because by coming into the city in a car that pollutes, you're hurting other people potentially, and we don't think that's a fair trade-off.
Clive Lewis there. He says we're paying a price for convenience, but we already pay road tax, we already pay fuel duty. Some people will be frustrated about this idea.
Unfortunately, it is, as you said, road tax, fuel duty. It is nothing to do with the roads. It doesn't get to the city council or the county council and what have you. But
what would you do with it if you had the money?
But it's not so much about having the money. We have the powers and the money. We'd need something. But the reality is, as has been pointed out, we need to have a proper system of maybe scrappage. I mean, Clive mentioned cars. Well, the reality is, part of the thing is they were talking about everything else but the ordinary vehicle. But I certainly feel that diesel certainly needs to be phased out in terms of vehicles. We were encouraged to have diesel. We were encouraged. It was supposed to be eco. Certain cars have got eco on them, and they're actually diesel vehicles. And so we were encouraged. Now we've realised what the difference is. We now need to get on with it. And as Adrian's right. Andrew's right. Sorry, Adrian. It's good to have it now. I'm sorry about we didn't do it before, but let's get on with it now. Let's not.
Well, let's ask Elena. What are you worried about for the impact on the haulage industry? If it came to Norwich, what could it mean?
The impact I feel is that our industry has already been used to schemes like this already. You know, London being one of the biggest ones, it has already been into play. So we are used to it. Businesses like myself and many others out there across the country, we are already investing in cleaner vehicles, and it comes at a price. Basically, you know, we can't buy these new up-to-date Euro 6 vehicles without investing in that money. But my main concern is our businesses who are already using that investment into their vehicles going to get charged on top, because I see that as an unfair advantage.
That would be silly, wouldn't it?
It would be silly.
It'd be silly. The whole point is to do the vehicles that are the pollutants, not the ones at Euro 6.
Exactly, exactly. Because I think us as an industry, we are always looked upon that because we're the biggest, we're always the one that's always contributing more to air pollution and things like that. And I don't think it's just me. There are many companies out there. We're all conscious of clean air, and like you rightly said, we don't just want clean air in cities. We want clean air in rural. You know, my business is based in Norfolk, right in the centre of rural Norfolk. You know, I don't want to damage wildlife or people or anything. So we're all trying to do things to make it better. But I just think that it needs to be. If government are going to bring it in and govern it, it needs to be set that there are limits, and it's not going to penalise people that are already making a massive investment.
Okay, well let's just hear from some other concerns as well, and if that new charging zone were introduced, it would be for the most polluting vans, lorries and taxis. Arthur Blunt is from the Roadrunner Express Courier Company in Norwich, and he's worried about the potential impact.
Personally, I think it's going to affect small companies more so than the bigger companies. The fact that they want to introduce some sort of charge to enter the city would just cause us a massive issue with regards to cost to our customers. Being a smaller courier service, we cover the whole of Norfolk and Suffolk, so coming into the city is a daily basis for us. Any cost that will be incurred, we can't forward on to our customers.
So some concerns there, Andrew Boswell, about cost to small businesses. How can we address that?
I mean, I absolutely feel that. I mean, and what you're saying, Helena, you know, and this has got to be equitable. But the whole thing about cost is, when you look at those 40,000 deaths a year, that actually costs the UK economy and the health service £27.5 billion a year. So actually there's a lot of money there, and what isn't happening is the government aren't making the right join up. You know, it's the government have got to take action. They've got to give the councils more money. They've got to put money into the scrappage scheme, and they will save money long term from the NHS and the social cost of people dying younger.
But austerity is a reality that we have to live with.
Well, no, it's not. There's lots of money sloshing about in government. Austerity is just
get all those people to pay their taxes who don't, or seem to have offshore. Get the offshore accounts sorted out.
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, actually,
it's a whole different debate.
Actually, it's a really important point. There's lots of money sloshing about. The government don't always join the dots. Okay. They're being forced to join the dots because of this court case. Now they need to do something. Andrea Leadsom and people like that, they need to get off that, to be honest. They need to get off their proverbials and get into action on this.
Okay, well, let's hear from another group who might feel the impact of any charging zone, and they would be the taxi drivers. Many of them do drive diesel cars. So how would it affect their business? We spoke to some of them this morning to find out.
If there's a pollution charge, obviously that we'd have to have fare increases, you know what I mean? That would obviously lose us customers and everything else. But I think it's absolutely ridiculous, because we can't go out and buy an electric taxi because they're renting on out. You know, so I think he's jumping the gun a bit.
These cabs, they started taking them off the road now because the emissions, a lot of them are coming off the road, so drivers are going to have to either rent more expensive vehicles, or they're going to have to buy more expensive vehicles. And at the end of the day, if you're running at a loss, you just can't afford to continue.
Views of taxi drivers there. They're worried about their business
Well,
program now.
let's be fair about it. There will be taxis that will be running there who will be with new vehicles. You could see them there. If they're running the really old ones with old engines, then quite honestly, sorry, they've got to do something about it. They've been making money out of it for years upon years upon years, and they don't want to change. It's easy. And as someone, it really is quite simply that this, especially if you're talking in terms of a scrappage scheme, if we turn around and say, no, let's replace them, let's help them. We've helped the buses. The bus companies have been given thousands of pounds in Norwich to put Euro 6, Euro 5, increase their... So let's help the taxis.
But do you sympathise with them? I mean, you're in business. Can it be difficult?
It can be difficult, and I think the problem is because certain industries get stuck in their own ways. I come from a family-run business. It's generations upon generations, and we do always have to keep looking forward. You have to always think about the better, what you can do to make things better. And a few years ago, my industry was perhaps anti the LEZ zone, but we've embraced it. We've had no choice. It's came in. We have to run with it. But
that's the one in London, isn't it?
It is the one in London. But it's got to be made sure that it is implemented correctly, so that, like I say, businesses that are making that investment are not going to have to. Because I can tell you now, there is a very, very little profit margin when it comes into our industry, and to pass it on to the customer, that is not going to happen. And companies like myself and other companies in our industry, we cannot swallow it because costs are so tight as it is at the moment. But I do completely agree. Let's drive people forward to upgrade their vehicles. There's plenty of manufacturers out there now.
We'll talk some more about solutions after the break. I just want to hear from you. You've been getting in touch on social media as always. Hedra Jim says the most polluting vehicles are usually driven by people who can't afford an eco-friendly one. Bruce Davis also worried. He says Norwich is dying on its feet. More shops are empty than ever before. It's not true, says Bert Bremner, but he thinks all this effort wants to be put into bringing people into the county's capital, not keeping them away. And Tom Rochester said, sorry, our county is one of the most rural in the country. He says, I know many do not shop there anymore as it's already such a hassle to get there. I live out in the country. It's going to be difficult, isn't it, Bert, for people who live outside city?
The buses have really, access to the buses is absolutely incredible, and the increase in bus usage has been phenomenal in Norwich.
But the park and ride's not that cheap, is it?
And the park and ride is really working. But the other side of that is that Norwich is thriving. That person talking about empty shops, they need to get a life and go and have a look at the rest of the country, because Norwich is actually bucking the trend all over and has been for long. So I'm sorry, these people who are dissing Norwich.
Shopping wise, great.
Yeah,
but we do need to have a better public transport system. We need to keep on building it. And actually, there's been a lot. Money's been taken out of it year on year by the county council.
And we'll talk some more about all of those things after the break. Do stay with us. We'll be talking about other possible solutions to the problem of pollution in Norwich. Stay with us. Welcome back. Tonight we're talking about pollution in Norwich after one of our MPs decided to support the idea of a clean air zone in the city. If it were to go ahead, it could mean that the most polluting buses, vans and lorries would be charged for coming into the city centre. So how much of an issue is pollution in Norwich? We went out to ask people what they thought.
It's less now that they're pedestrianising the centre of the town. I'm all for that. However, the buses still emit diesel fumes, which are very prevalent when I'm walking about.
It's not good for health, especially I have asthma. That makes it worse, air pollution. If I'm waiting for a bus up St Stephen's and I can feel getting a bit tight-chested, I can feel it's getting worse, I get a bit wheezy.
I was really pleasantly surprised when I arrived here. I lived in Hong Kong about a decade ago, and it was literally a city that when you washed your face at night with water and soap, it came dripping off black, and everybody experienced that.
So a mix of views there, Andrew Boswell, and we've been measuring, haven't we, the pollution on Castle Meadow for quite some time.
Well, the pollution's been measured there for over 10 years. It's actually been illegal at the EU level for all of the last 10 years. I think there has been some progress recently, but we need to sort of really hear the 2016 figures. But what's actually needed is the money to the council and the powers to the council to do something. And we actually came up with a 5-point plan actually for that. I won't obviously go into it in detail, but there's key things like retrofitting the buses with the highest diesel, to the highest diesel levels. They've only done about 15 buses. There's nearly 200, so we've got about 165 more to do of that. So that's one thing which would really make a big difference in the Castle Meadow area.
Well, let's ask Elaine, what would make a big difference to the haulage industry? I mean, you talked about different kinds of engines.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically said that for every 5 Euro 6 heavy trucks, is equivalent to, I believe, either 3 or 1 Euro 5 truck. So,
what are you running at the moment?
We're running a mixture of Euro 5s and Euro 6s. So, because that is predominantly, I mean, if you're running Euro 4, then we're talking seriously old. But I mean, like I said,
could we ever see electric trucks on the road, do you think?
It is talked about, but the thing is there's so many more implications. There's more weight gain, there's how far, if you're predominantly a tramper, how far will that electric get you?
Long way off, do you think?
A very, very, very long way off from where I would be sitting from.
What would you like to see change?
Well, I was going to say the buses, no matter what, the one thing about the buses is actually that there's two parts to it. Yes, I was really pleased that Norfolk got some money from the government to retrofit those buses to Euro 5 and Euro 6, I think. But the reality is actually that there's already a lot of the buses are already Euro 5, Euro 6. The park and ride buses are. It is those older ones that seem to come in, maybe from outside firms. I mean, I saw one which had N registration. I mean, there's a load of buses coming through that are in the 21st century.
Okay.
And we need to do something about them. And I think there's the point. They're probably the worst polluters. Let's deal with them, either to get them off the road and replace them.
You're talking about the electrics. I mean, where we really can make a big difference is with electric cars, and we really need to be putting the infrastructure in for that. That's all the charging points. The technology is really moving quickly. The battery technology, you've probably heard about the biggest factory in the world in California churning out all the batteries. We need to sort of grab that opportunity, but to do that in Norwich, we need to have the charging technology, and we need to sort of do whatever we need to do to apply to grants to the government, the councils, whatever.
But the other side, what we have been able to do, and that has been pointed out in where you were. I'm on Brigg Street, and there's a whole situation where, all right, there's buses and there's taxis going through, but no through traffic through the city centre has really transformed it. And we're in a situation where there are tens to 50,000 people moving, and only 1,000 or so, or 2,000 vehicles in the same time. And we're talking about the change in the city centre. Now, obviously, the city centre isn't the only place. We're talking about the other areas outside the city centre, and of course the suburbs. Unless you're right about, let's have a clean chroma. Let's have Aylsham.
Let's hear some other ideas for the city. And as we've heard, the Green Party are hoping that this will happen, this clean air zone. And Councillor Martin Schmierer says eventually he would like to see any charging zone apply to private vehicles as well.
The easiest one to start with are obviously the taxi fleets and the bus fleets, and then we can move on to the private drivers. Now, in terms of the public transport, what we in the Green Party have been advocating for is a move from what they call the Euro 3 standard, which are still very polluting buses on our roads, and you see that on the likes of Castle Meadow and elsewhere, and moving over to more newer and better buses, what they call the sort of Euro 4, 5 and 6 standard. Now, in terms of the taxi fleets, we obviously have to work with taxi drivers. It is their livelihoods, and that is where government and local authorities can come in to really improve the quality of the vehicles on our roads. And then, as I said about the diesel scrappage scheme, that really has to come from the national government to ensure that everyone is driving better and less polluting cars.
He's talking about adding on private cars, but that's going to be really unpopular with drivers, isn't it?
I don't think it is. They had a situation where we had scrappage for older cars, not that long ago.
The congestion charge in London was really unpopular with drivers.
It was really unpopular. It isn't now. The reality is that scrappage scheme really worked for people. Diesel scrappage would be, I think you'd find that there'd be great support for it. And yes, let's get it. It'd be good for business, but let's understand it. It would be an improvement.
But people are already complaining about the changes to the road system in the city centre. If you start charging them to come in, they're going to go crazy.
People are really pleased. I mean, all right, there's change taking place and there's a load of roadworks, and while the roadworks are taking place, but I've been here long enough to say that every time there's a change, people think, oh, there's a change and we're worried about the roadworks, and then they're incredibly happy. I was there when they started the first one-way system through it, and in the early hours of the morning, we drove the wrong way.
You've got to remember that the scrappage scheme would be a national system. And the point I made earlier, £27.5 billion a year, the cost of the health damage, loss of life with this. Let's put some of that money. If we put 10 billion in 1 year, you could give a lot of people scrappage on that, and it really make a big difference.
I'll come back to you in a moment, Helena, but let's hear from some other solutions to the problems of congestion and pollution in the city. We asked Arthur Blunt, who runs that courier company in Norwich.
I think what would help congestion is if the local governments or councils decided to open up the taxi lanes and the bus lanes to couriers. At the moment we have no access to them, and that makes it very difficult for us to get in and around the city, whereas a lot of the time we're sitting there idling in traffic, causing probably more congestion than is necessary. So if they were to look at those options, I think that would help not just our company but every company that delivers to the city, in and around the city, would make it so much easier for everybody, and I think that would reduce emissions in its own.
Helena Wright, what do you make of that?
I mean, I don't run a courier company, but I mean, I technically can see his point of people idling. But let's be honest, you are going to idle no matter where you are in the country. It doesn't matter whether you're in Norwich, Cambridge, Edinburgh, it does not matter. You're going to idle. But the fact of the matter is, diesel engines are branded bad. They're not bad. Euro 6 emissions are so good. I mean, they're probably even in the pipeline looking at Euro 7 and Euro 8, let's be honest.
Do we understand all of that, though? It's so complicated.
It's all about a generation of letting air intake to be able to, and the additive, if you imagine an exhaust on an LGV now has an actual, it has a chemical which is put into it, basically AdBlue, which a lot of people might hear. It's getting more familiar with cars now with AdBlue and agricultural tractors and buses. It basically puts that chemical into the exhaust, and it basically helps break down particles. You can the gases and the particles and the fumes that come out of a Euro 6 engine, you can pretty much breathe pretty much straight off. It is pretty much as clean as what you would be sitting at home.
Let's ask Bert Bremner about the couriers in the bus lanes. Could it work?
Well, I was going to say, I think what Helena says is so helpful, and it is quite simple. Euro 6 is
but
really,
should we let them
effective.
go in the bus lanes?
No.
Why not?
No way, because what's the point? So as a courier, it's a van. Should it be George Bloggs' builder's van going in it? Should it be...
we need to limit the amount of cars to be able to let free flow of traffic of people who need to be in the city.
And the other side of it is, you're absolutely right, and the other side of it is that what's happened is the bus lanes are being incredibly effective because of the reliability and the way the buses can get through. People are using buses far more, keeping masses of cars off the road.
All right, we're almost out of time. Let's hear from you again. Frankie Richer says, start with the diesel buses running the engines. He says, check out the dual fuel bus service in Essex. He said that he went on it recently and it only switched to diesel after passing a 30-mile-an-hour sign. Emma Watts says the answer is a tram system like Nottingham. You don't see many cars there. She says it's peaceful and it's clean. A very brief word from you.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is a very good system, the Nottingham one, but I think, at the moment we probably haven't got the resources to do that. But I would like to say on the diesel issue that it also is producing carbon dioxide. So we do need to move off anything burning fossil fuels in the long term. And that's very important. And the other thing I think
I'm so sorry, but we really are out of time. Thank you to all of you for taking part, but that is unfortunately all we've got time for this evening. If you want to add your comments to the debate, you can find us via the Mustard TV Facebook page, or we're on Twitter at Mustard This Week. Good night.
Thanks.